of the Maui Invitational is that the reigning back-to-back national champion Connecticut Huskies have lost back-to-back games. UConn, heading into Monday, was 47-3 in their last 50 games, and they were 37-1 in their last 38 non-conference games. Now 0-2 at the Maui Invitational, playing in a 7th-place game against a good Dayton team tomorrow night. And they find themselves here soul-searching after a gut punch of a loss, 73-72 to a Colorado team that was picked second to last in the Big 12. Before we get to some of Jeff Goodman's take on the other things happening, Mike LaTulip, let's talk basketball for a moment, and then Rob, and then I'm going to get to Jeff on this. Mike, what has gone wrong for UConn in these two games? What are you noticing most?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying I'm not out on UConn. I don't think they're going to three-peat. But again, Big East still feels like it's up for grabs. Look, the big questions, right? It's at the point guard spot. It's perimeter defense, and to me, it's the effectiveness. What type of effectiveness you're going to get from that kind of rotation at the 5 spot? Those are just kind of basketball questions. Psychological questions that I think I might have are, we always talk about, hey, they got to figure out their roles. They got to, the team needs to find their identity. And for me, it's even more blunt than that. Like, guys need to get used to being depended on. Like, you are depended on now. There's not Tristan Newton late clock in the middle third of the floor. There's not, Steph Castle absorbing the toughest defensive assignment. There's not Donovan Clingan back there to, cover up defensive sins. And so there is a standard that has been set at UConn over the last 25 years, especially in the last 2 years. And expectations come with that, but also playing for Dan Hurley, there's a certain attention to detail that you need to succeed. And if there's one thing like that UConn team last year and the year before, no question they had talent. No question. But those teams also didn't beat themselves. And I think that's been a big component of what we're seeing from UConn. And like the details matter. Like I'll give a quick example, right? Terrace Reed fouls out. You got to go small. Caravan's essentially at the 5. And, you got Malone. They throw it into the post. McNeely comes over to trap. The one thing you can't do when you trap is let someone split you. The one thing. And McNeely comes over. They get split, layup, cut it to 1 with whatever it was, 50 seconds left. So that, to me, it's like it's the details for them. Beyond like just accepting the challenge of like, this is who we got in this locker room. I think the early returns on the Mahaney side of things, like, I'm not saying it's a failed experiment yet, but he's already out of the lineup, already out of the starting lineup, and and spent most of the second half on the bench. So I think 2 things need to happen beyond what I just mentioned. However much McNeely feels like he has to shoot, it needs to be more, and they need to play with more pace. Like I think you're putting so much strain on your offense, constantly getting in the half court, running action after action. I know Hurley succeeds with that, but you have to figure out a way to get out in transition, to play with more pace, and that all starts on the defensive end as well. So that was about 8 things that I mentioned, but it all comes back to the details for UConn.
Everything that you just mentioned is literally what I have written down. So, one, are you the one that's been watching UConn for like 10 straight years, or is it me? Like, has it been? Are you? Yeah. No, I know. Look.
No. Wait a minute. Jeff. Everything that Mike said, Rob had written down. But Jeff, is there any chance that Rob would have delivered it in the same clarity that Mike LaTulip just delivered it in?
I'll give it let's call it a 2.5% chance, right?
What's wrong, Rob? Rob, what's wrong with this team?
Everything that Mike just said. Like, it's the point guard play. It is the 5 spot. Like, Sampson fouls too much, and Terrace Reed doesn't really know what he's doing defensively in that role yet. Aiden Mahaney's not you're not ready to cut bait yet, Mike. Like it's getting close to time to say like Ahmad Noel is the backup point guard and Hassan Diarra is the starting point guard. what I would add to that is the reason why the offense that they had last year worked is that Tristan Newton is 6'5" and 210 pounds and was not getting bullied by anybody. You want to press him? What he's going to do is he's just going to put his ass into you and walk up to the 3-point line, and they're going to run offense from the 3-point line, right? They had guys that were old, a fifth-year senior in Cam Spencer that wasn't getting knocked off of his path. If he wanted to come around that screen, he was getting around that screen, right? You're not going to move Steph Castle. Steph Castle's going to go where he wants to go, and you don't have that this year. So when you get into your offense, and Hassan Diarra is the one bringing the ball up, like, they're starting their offense 40 feet away from the basket instead of 25 feet away from the basket. And when you're trying to run something as intricate as what they're running, where you want to get these DHOs, where you're trying to get these different cuts, where you're trying to find these different slips, where you're trying to run counters to your counters to your counters, it's not going to work if you are 44 feet away from the basket. Like, you're not going to be able to make the passes that make that offense tick. So that's part of the problem. The defense is a massive issue. Like, right now on Torvik, based off of what they've done this season without any of like the preseason stuff factored in, they rank 199th in the country defensively. They're fourth offensively. Like, I think that they'll be able to figure it out on that end. I don't even know, man. Like, you got problems at the 5 because you can't protect the rim and you can't stay out of foul trouble. You got problems at the point because you don't have guys that can stop the ball or prevent penetration. You got problems on the wings because these young guys like don't really know what they're doing, and you don't really have great defenders. I think, here's my take, is that, one, you got all this length and athleticism. Like, maybe let's try like throwing a press on there, like maybe a 1-2-2, 3/4 court, something or other. Maybe throw a 1-3-1 zone in there. Last night against Memphis, we saw a 2-3 zone. I can't remember ever seeing Dan Hurley run a 2-3 zone ever. Maybe some more of that stuff. Like, you got to mix it up. You got to junk it up. You got to do, like, Bill Self loves throwing these random like triangle and twos out there whenever he's getting his ass kicked, because you just don't know what to do against it. And I think that Hurley has got to get like just more creative, where you just run this random stuff. You try to mess everything up. You try to make the other team uncomfortable. You get some rebounds. You get out in transition, and you take advantage of the fact that there's like 5 or 6 guys on this team that are going to be 6'7" pros one day, whether it's Jalen Stewart or Jaden Ross or Solo Ball or Alex Caravan. Like, you got guys that are long and athletic. Get out and run. Take advantage of it. I think that's what the key is going to end up being. And my guess is we see that a lot more as we get closer to Big East play.
I'll clear out for Jeff here in a moment. Here's what I would say about what you just said. We talk about the last 2 years and what Connecticut's had up front at center. They had Donovan Clingan and Samson Johnson last year. The year before that, they had Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan. But one of the things that we don't talk about, and the other thing was Tristan Newton as an All-American point guard, which took him time, but then he figured it out. One of the things that I don't think we talk enough about is a bully on the wing defensively. Andre Jackson covered so much ground defensively. You know, Jeff, he was the all-encompassing player. Last year, for a one-and-done kid, Steph Castle was built like a bulldog, and he just took away anything and everything defensively. I'm not worried about Connecticut's ability to make shots and generate offense. And running their stuff right now is harder because their point guard play is well below average for what the standard is, and Aiden Mahaney is not panned out. But where I stand is they're not guarding. Their on-ball defense is non-existent. They've got to fix a lot on the defensive end of the floor. But more than anything, you've lost a game that went down to the wire against Memphis, and you lost a game that went down to the buzzer against Colorado. And throughout these games, Jeff, the head coach of the Huskies, in Dan Hurley, has had some very highly emotional